How's it going, everyone? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the pod, going to be talking with Ben Kanute, professional triathlete and Olympian. If you don't know who Ben Kanute is, you've probably been living under a rock, especially if you listen to this podcast. But Ben's an awesome guy. He's a father. He's a husband, obviously a professional triathlete, and a deep thinker, analytical guy, and a really good conversation we had today. So if you are here, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe. That helps to continue to grow the show. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to my friend Ben Kanute. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate you carving out some time on the schedule for me.
Yeah, for sure. No worries. Worked out well.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember this. I introduced myself to you. I know you probably meet tons of people, but I was in Tucson like 2 years ago. I was visiting Mark Dubrick for a little bit, and I just saw you randomly at the pool. I forget even which pool it was. I think it was in Scottsdale, maybe. You live in Scottsdale,
That probably
right?
is right, because I was like, yeah, Tucson. I'm like, I haven't been in Tucson. Like, the times that I've been in Tucson have been so short in the past, 5 years. But yeah, I probably, like, if we did run into each other, it's probably at one of the Scottsdale pools.
Yeah. Cool. Sweet. Well, it's fun to get to chat with you.
Nice.
So, I don't have any like super structured way of doing this other than to just start firing off some questions, get to know you a little bit. And at any point you ever want to say, hey, I don't want to answer that question, you can definitely do that.
Okay, no worries.
But yeah, it should be fun. Yeah, cool. So first question, according to you, who is Ben Kanute?
Who's Ben? That's a good question. I think I could just a few quick words like father, husband, triathlete, maybe hobbyist. I tend to sometimes when I get into something, it's kind of like triathlon where you become like obsessed with something. When I do something, I like to do it correctly. So I end up researching like in there. And then I think just like human being, I just try and be like a good person overall. Like all humans, I don't know if I'm exactly perfect at that, but yeah, I think that's kind of it without maybe taking too long of a pause to really like think extra hard about it.
Yeah. Well, you can take any of the pause you want. Where are you from?
I grew up west of Chicago originally, so that's like Geneva and then St. Charles and Batavia. It's like the Tri-Cities area, and was there all the way through high school, graduated, and went to the University of Arizona in Tucson, and lived in Arizona, then in Phoenix too for like 10 or 15 years before now we moved up to Loveland, Colorado, just pretty much exactly a year ago. So been kind of all over.
Yeah, and you have two kids?
2 kids, 3 and a 5-year-old. So always busy, chasing them around.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I can imagine. I just had my first daughter today's 14 days ago. So starting to get and figure out. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I was hoping maybe you'd give me some tips on how to survive and live.
I think I like to say, like almost there's no advice in that. Yeah. Like you just kind of figure it out as you go. Cause I tried to, I like read books. We asked a bunch of parents and stuff like that. And then you find out that your kid is completely different. Or like after having 2 kids, like my daughter hated sleeping, like just still to this day, it's like hard to get her to go down versus my son. Like we could like set him down in the bassinet at the crib, whatever it was. And he would like pass out. So it's funny. I'm like, man, we should just make all our money, just write a kid's book claiming X, Y, and Z, because it's neither right or wrong. It just like is our experience. So that's kind of what I always tell people is like, you just kind of figure it out as you go almost.
Yeah, no, it's so funny because I have quite a few friends. I'm 33. And so quite of my friends already have kids. And I feel like I've had plenty of conversations, seeing them, going and visiting them, seeing their kids some. But there's so many things that I didn't know existed that I was like, why didn't you ever tell me about this? Like, I never even knew what rooting was until like a week ago. And I never heard anyone talk about rooting or any of these other like just what I would have considered obscure topics to talk about. But now I'm like, oh, wow, this is fascinating. Like, I feel like the learning curve for this is so steep. There's so many things every second.
It's like no matter how many things you read or hear about, it's like there's always something that was missed that you're like, why didn't anybody tell me about this? So it makes it fun though. And you get to see, I guess, the world from a different point of view as well, which makes everything like even that much more exciting and fun.
Yeah. What is your oldest? How old?
She's 5, and then my
Okay.
son is basically they're pretty much exactly 2 years apart, both December birthdays. So yeah, kind of
Yeah.
a good spacing.
Okay. So 5 years, I guess it's been 10 years since you were, an Olympian. So I imagine
Yeah.
life has changed quite a bit in the past decade. Compare and
Yeah.
contrast for me a little bit, like the Ben of 10 years ago and the Ben of 5 years ago and the Ben now, because like so much has happened in terms of family, obviously career.
True. I've had a few different coaches in the time. Obviously, like I was a couple years out of college or a few years out of college at the end of 2016. I was living with just my best friend in Tucson with the Olympics and qualifying. That's where I met my wife. She was the only one.
Okay.
She was a local news reporter in Phoenix, and so she was the only one to actually do a story on me qualifying for the games, and that's how we originally met. And
That's cool.
I think the biggest thing is just when you have your first kid and then your second kid, you keep looking like at that one transition. You're like, what did I do with all my spare time before? Because you feel like you're always really busy and you're doing a lot. Like when you don't have kids and then you have one kid and you're like, wow, this is a lot. Like we're doing a bunch of stuff. Like, there's different, like even early on, it's like we're up in the middle of the night. There's different wake periods. You got bottles. You have all this extra laundry to do. Like there's all these different things. And then they start to get older and mobile and you're like, oh man, they just don't stay in one spot anymore. Then you have a second kid and you're like, oh my gosh, like I had so much time with the one baby beforehand because I could pass it off to my wife or she could pass it
Yeah.
off to me. And then, it's just one. Now we're on like man-to-man defense here. And, if you add one more, I'm sure it's the same thing where it's like zone defense and you're like, oh, it's just chaotic at this point. So I think the biggest thing is just almost like you squeeze a little bit more out of the day. And I think that everything is maybe a bit more intentional. Like I was always intentional with my training and what I was doing. But when I think that there's just kind of more things like when I'm training, I'm focused, but then I have to be able to turn off of training and turn off of triathlon to come back to family life and be able to do that part. And I think as tiring as it is, maybe chasing around two toddlers and having a busy lifestyle, I also think it's energizing because I've also done the triathlon 24/7. And for me and how I work, like I just start to get burnt out that way. It was like too much focus on one specific thing and over analyzing. And maybe that was a bit because I was young too. And you're really trying to find your place in the, hierarchy of your sport. But yeah, I just found having that extra balance, like keeps you refreshed and engaged and happy.
Good answer. With a little bit ago, you mentioned being, kind of obsessive after you get into something. You really go in deep and hard and try to figure it out, what's going on. How early in your life do you think that you started to have the self-awareness to recognize that about yourself?
That's a good question. I think in general, there was always things that like caught my attention. Because I mean, as a kid, you get really excited. Like I always wanted to be some sort of professional athlete. I just didn't know triathlon was a pathway to that until I was a few years at least into my kind of trying out triathlon because I wanted to play baseball or, soccer or something. I figured out pretty quick I wasn't very good at ball sports, but like I think in any task or anything, like I've come to really appreciate, especially as I got older, like always enjoyed watching the Olympics. I love watching people who excel at what they do, and to be able to excel at something and make something look easy, you kind of have to dive in like that. So I guess with some of the hobby stuff, like I guess I was always a little bit I'm hesitant to call it a perfectionist, but I always really tried to apply myself and get it really right, like even through school. And I basically framed everything like a competition. So even like grades, class ranking, that sort of thing, like I just wanted to be as good as I could be in there. And I think my parents instilled some of that, but to kind of get back to some of the obsessiveness, like I do have like just vivid memories, like in high school, like, you break down your splits, and swimming, I think probably really brings that out because high school, like the 500 free was my event. And I just remember writing out different splits for each 50 Like, so there's 10 50s in the 500, just every single split that I could potentially do, or what I had to average to go a certain time and that sort of thing. And that carries over into running. It can carry over into cycling and stuff. So I think some of that details and actually figuring out too, like, hey, if I get like really focused and specific, whether it's with studying or even in sport, you can find tips and tricks to actually make it easier overall. It's kind of like the whole people tinkering with aerodynamics and cycling. You don't actually have to be stronger to go faster. You just have to be faster overall. And that's in finding some of those details, whether it's aero helmet or trying to find a few watts here or there with like wax chains and that sort of thing. So I think those sorts of things and having that curiosity has helped over the years.
With the obsessive side again, just because I'm curious, because I read a little bit like that you witnessed your father, I guess, do a triathlon when you were the age of 7 in the Chicago area, and that was like a catalyst moment for you. So there was, I would assume that he is a little bit of that type. But what about your mom? Is she also?
Yeah, I mean, I think they both set good examples, and they both encouraged us to do our best. And it wasn't ever a, hey, you have to get straight A's or you have to win the race or anything. But it's like when you're doing something, you really have to apply yourself. And, you know, I saw my dad do that and my mom do that a lot. My dad was a lawyer growing up, and he was like, he over prepares for trial cases and depositions and stuff like that. And, you know, my mom was always, you know, trying to get us organized out the door, like juggling 3 kids, 3 boys, like running around the house. So like applying yourself, like I took some of that example. And also I think maybe I ran with it a little bit too. And it's like, okay, how do I, if I'm going to apply myself, like how do I get to like the top in what I'm doing? Like, how do I get the A on the test? How do I win the race? And so once you start breaking that down, then you kind of start diving into the different areas, whether it's I need to work harder at the topic or I need to look into equipment. And I just found those sorts of things really interesting. And I think triathlon, part of that kept me coming back with kind of that obsessiveness is I have 3 different sports that I can break down. And even, you know, you count transitions and stuff like that. Like you have so many different areas to try and be detailed with. It really kept me engaged versus maybe some of those other hobbies or sports or school or whatever. You do the same thing over and over and over again. And you feel like you kind of exhaust some of that maybe, but triathlon for whatever reason just continued to kind of pull me in a little bit. And some of that like obsessiveness was spread out. So like you focus on swimming for a long period of time, and maybe as you're starting to get a little bit burnt out of it because you kind of go that all in, then you can shift and kind of do the bike, and then you can shift and do the run or focus on transitions. So because I think like the danger with that obsessiveness sometimes is the burnout and the whole of like you go in super hot, super motivated, and overextend yourself, and you have to be able to weather those periods of not seeing as much improvement from that kind of application or obsessiveness that you're doing.
So where do you pull from motivation, from a motivational perspective, once things do kind of plateau or you don't see an immediate gain or change or breaking of new ground?
Well, I think it's important to look at it like if you're looking at like the micro scale, like day to day or workout to workout versus even like the macro scale of year to year and where you're at. So at this point in my career, like one of my main goals always is to win a world championship. And so it's always working backwards from that, from where I'm at and what I've done last season. And I think one of the facts that I am like, I'm a professional. It's how I earn my money. It's how I support my family. There's not really an option to skip. I kind of put that in early on in my career even, and my parents also kind of instilled in that, because once, like whenever we started a program, we weren't allowed to really quit it halfway through. You at least had to see it out through the season. And then at the end of the season, you can make the decision, you know, if you want to continue or not. And that, I think, helped me get through a lot of hard days, especially in club swimming, where after school you're going, and in the middle of winter in Chicago, like you're going to jump in a cold pool and do workouts. So I think I learned discipline early on in balancing sport and school because everything was so structured. And then as it almost got harder, like as I got along like to college and post college where there's more free time, how do you structure that? And it's just for me, like I have to keep, training and execution toward the top of the list. Like those are the things I have to do and prioritize that and work everything else around. So as far as motivation goes, there's tools that I use to help keep the discipline, which discipline rules everything. And that's, might be favorite songs. It might be looking towards the world championships and knowing, hey, I just want to be a little bit better today. And I stack these 100 days of being a little bit better. I want to put myself in a good position for the world champs. It could be a rivalry. It could be, getting to the swim group because we got some good banter there. It's some fun people. Like that's motivating. Picking your favorite route on the bike versus just going on the trainer. So there's lots of different ways you can find things that make what you're doing fun, because that's kind of the core of why we choose to continue to do stuff, is that having fun aspect and the curiosity, and to get through some of those hard times and those plateaus.
When you find that you're racing and times get tough, are you racing from a place of like anger or of just like happiness and joy? Is there something that you meditate on? Like, where do you typically race from?
I think the best place to race from is like a calmness and a sense of joy and curiosity. I think that I kind of relate, and I do like some of that like anger, racing with emotion a little bit, like the football players coming out of the tunnel and acting like just getting super fired up. But that, with the type of racing we do, is really hard to do for 7.5 hours in an Ironman race. When I race super sprint stuff and you're racing above threshold, you can kind of let that go a little bit more. But when you're in an Ironman, you really have to keep it in check and like kind of slowly open that valve, maybe let a little bit out, but keep bringing yourself back to like calmness center, because it's all just an energy expenditure game. Like you're trying to save as much energy as you can for those last few miles of the run, the last half of the marathon. So that's where I think, as I've gotten older as well, it's about more looking at execution and being calm and kind of sorting through the race that way and being present in the moment rather than just like a pure emotion. But obviously I do think too, like Ironman is an emotional thing. The first couple Ironmans I went through around that half marathon point, like I got emotional because one, I saw my family in, another one, I had some guy cheering for me super loud and didn't really expect that sort of thing. So it was like, then I had to like kind of recollect myself and be like, okay, save that like for the next in 6 miles, then feedback off of that, because you're only halfway through the marathon. You got another, hour 20, hour 30 to go. So that's where I think like, yeah, that joy, calm and curiosity of just like, let's kind of see. And that's the best place I think to race from.
Can you recall any of like moments when you did not have that calm and you just fell apart?
Yeah, I think so. I've had a rough, probably 2 or 3 years of racing coming through. Like Challenge Roth in 2023 was kind of like my last race where I felt very like I had rough moments and it was challenging, but I felt like I was racing my race in control. And when I asked the body to go, it went. Obviously, last few miles of that didn't feel good at all because it's an Ironman distance race and it's going to really hurt. But since then, I think there's been like a lot of ups and downs where, I might have some good results, but I still feel like the body was rebelling based on just, the type of training I was doing, the stressors just wasn't doing it. So I've had to kind of learn how to control how I'm feeling and how my mind is talking to myself in those really bad races. Because I've had since then, like I've had at least a couple Ironmans where I'm running at 8:30 pace and can't go any faster, and it feels like my body is just not working. And in those moments, I would say I don't really have it together. Like there, you're questioning, like the Ironman Frankfurt was in particular kind of the turning point for me last year, where I'm out on the run course. I was at the front of the race, kind of through the bike, got out onto the run, could kind of tell early on that the body wasn't really doing very great, but you still try and talk to yourself and say, hey, it's a marathon, a long way to go. but it just progressively got worse and worse. And then by the halfway point, like the Kona slot's gone, prize money's gone. You traveled all the way to Europe feeling like you're in good shape to go. And my backup plan was to potentially go to Lake Placid, Ironman Lake Placid, to go and race if I missed out. But then I was like, if I'm having a hard time getting through the marathon, like, what am I doing here? Like, I left my family at home. Race here. So that's where I think some of those, that was like probably the lowest point last year, because you cross the race, you sit on the steps in Europe alone and are just kind of like, what is happening? So I think it's not always perfect and you're not always going to nail that, but it is like recognizing too in the middle of races. Because on the flip side, last year in Oceanside, I had moments where I thought I would be dropped on the bike, where I was like, I don't think I'm going to go. And the previous year before that, I did get dropped and popped on one of those climbs, but I just kept trusting. It's just like, okay, just make it one more hill, just make it a little bit farther. And I kind of kept convincing myself to keep going. And all of a sudden, like, I made it with the main pack in a transition to put myself in a good position for the podium there versus, and that there's a lot of different reasons, I think, like, kind of behind that, even physiologically, but like that was like kind of the juxtaposition of both of those, where it's like, you're not talking well to yourself and it's just everything is going wrong, versus, hey, you can kind of pull yourself out of those moments sometimes. So I've kind of had practice across the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, for those internal voices that, like you said, you've battled with here this year, like right now, how do you feel? Like, are those voices quieted? Are you feeling strong?
I think the voice and the mind of an athlete are interesting, because when I look here, and if I look objectively, I'm way ahead of where I was last year at this point. Like, my numbers that I'm pushing, the amount of work I've been able to do, where we're at, all of the stresses in the life. Because like I said toward the beginning, like, we moved from Phoenix to Loveland, and that was a whole thing, and learning to be at altitude. So like, objectively, I feel really good. There's always that unknown though of like, hey, I raced my first race in Oceanside last year and did really well for everything that was going on, but can I do it again? And I'm like this right now, and I haven't done like a ton of race specific stuff. So how am I going to respond in another month when I start the season in Dallas 70.3? And, I'll have maybe one really good 3-week training block as we're building into this to do some real specific stuff. But it's just always that question of how is the body going to respond there. So on one hand, I'm feeling really confident and good about where I am. And then it's trying to quiet all of those normal doubts that people have, and even pros experience, where it's like, have I prepared enough? How is the body going to feel? What's going to happen in the race? How are these other guys going to race? Because you can't really control any of that stuff. All you can really control is the effort you're putting out every day and when you're in the race and everything like that. So I do feel like I've prepared very well for the season overall, especially in comparison to last year's. But I guess it's why we race, to figure out exactly, what's going to happen.
Yeah, what the truth is.
Yeah, exactly. Because if we race it all on paper, we'd all have the favorites and people who should win the race. But that's kind of the beautiful thing about racing and competition, is it doesn't really matter who the favorite is, because it's not a guaranteed thing.
Yeah. I want to go back a little bit to your college experience. Obviously, you were preparing for your life in the college way, and then the sports with the Olympics in mind and the different types of racing you were doing. But what did you take in college?
I took I took physiology, which at the University of Arizona was leaning a little bit more pre-med than just like a pure, like, okay. I really wanted like a kinesiology or an exercise physiology. So I got to take some of those classes. But my main goal going to college was, how can I bridge this great junior triathlon career that I had, still get an education and a university experience, but progress and maybe go and try my hand at racing professional in triathlon. And we kind of carved our own way in that way, where I just picked like Tucson, Arizona, and the university there. If you go and you visit, you kind of understand why people go to college there. It's great in the winter, a complete different thing than Chicago weather in there. So I chased a little bit of eternal summer. And then the
Mm-hmm.
university was awesome. I went to a super small high school, so I wanted a bit more of like big sports school experience and was able to get that. And I was going to just train on my own, but actually ended up falling into just the club triathlon team there had some ex D1 runners, some competitive triathletes, and I just, started training with a lot of those guys, which made it a lot more fun and got to race collegiate nationals. And that's actually how I got my pro card and wasn't going to take it. But
Okay.
then USA Triathlon gave me the opportunity to go race in Europe for about a month or so after my freshman year in college. So that kind of kickstarted my professional career. But yeah, it was never really for me an option to not go to college to get a degree just based on it because, having a backup plan, having some sort of degree, education, have that experience was all fairly important, I think, in the grand scheme of things. And I think actually kind of helped me in general, just in life and even being a professional.
Yeah. Well, if triathlon was to completely evaporate today and it was no longer a viable means of making, ends meet for your family, what do you think you would do?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm in the second half of my career. So I think that's something that's definitely on my mind a little bit just for, however many years I have left in the sport. Um, I mean, I've always enjoyed the sport in general. If you can't do any sort of like coaching or be involved in some way that way, I would have to really figure it out. I think it's a tough transition sometimes for athletes because we don't really have any like work experience necessarily. So I think I could be really good, in sales or something like that. Like I enjoy talking to people. I feel like I've sold myself quite a bit and kind of acted like
Mm-hmm.
as my own agent in a lot of capacities over the years. So I feel like I could have a good relationship that way in some capacity. But as far as the real world goes, I don't know. I think I would have to take a gap year to kind of figure it out or kind of work my way through jumping from one thing to the next to kind of figure out exactly, what it would be. But I think that's also kind of the exciting thing. Like I've had one area just be sport my entire life, and I think sport will always be a part of it in some way. And
Sure.
then whatever sorts of opportunities come up. So at this point, if I couldn't do it tomorrow, that'd be a little bit trickier than if I had a little bit of runway into it to try and set some things up. But yeah, I mean, I just think I like a challenge and like to apply myself that way. So, yeah, that's maybe I won't pigeonhole myself into one particular thing, but maybe that kind of blanket statement. So,
Yeah. No, I always love asking that question because, like you said, sports kind of been your thing since, I mean, arguably when you were very young, even before, college. But then when you started to lean into it, it became very much your identity in terms of how you relate to yourself. Having to sell yourself to other people, especially brands, when it comes to contracts, like you have to have this internal belief about yourself that you're selling so that they'll sign you. And obviously, there's a lot of weird internal discussions that go
yeah.
on then because if you don't perform, you're like, oh, am I actually worth it? Well, how do I?
And I
Yeah, it's
think
fascinating.
Yeah, and I think too, it's hard to, as a professional to give yourself that out as like, oh, this is my backup plan if things don't work out. Because I like to go kind of all in on things, and I've been all in on my professional career now for over 10 years, like 15-ish years. And I think that's why, like, it's been my full focus. So if I took away a lot of that mental energy from trying to excel at being a professional triathlete, then I think that performance could potentially suffer that way in trying to figure out all of that rest of the stuff. So, yeah, there's maybe a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of something there too, just mentally, and like, yeah, I don't even want the safety net like necessarily at this point. But I think it's been a really good practice, like you're say selling yourself, but just a good practice in networking as well. And that's like triathlon is such a niche sport, and you meet so many different people, and just being able to learn how to communicate with different people, brands, keep relations up, follow up with people, and just kind of like nurture relationships, I think is a good skill to kind of springboard whatever is next.
At this point in your career, do you find that more of your relationships with potential sponsors come from the outside in, or are you still pretty proactive in going out and seeking to find whatever the relationship is that you may be looking for?
It's a healthy mix. Like I've got a lot of friends in the industry who have connections. So I think sometimes because the industry does have turnover, especially in like that athlete relationship role where they're the ones who are in charge, like sometimes that's used as a springboard to different positions. So there might be turnover in one. So like if I had a business card from 4 years ago, that position could have turned over once, twice, or it could be the same person. But I think knowing somebody who's kind of like constantly in that realm too. So if I haven't known where to go for a connection, but I've been interested in a company, like I can ask around to a few different people and be like, hey, do you have this contact here or there? And then there's also still, people who have been in the sport for a long time, even if they've shifted different companies that you could always reach out to. So yeah, I've had a lot of good like long-term relationships as well. And then have been able to establish some new ones, like even just in the past few months.
Yeah. I don't know if you can answer this. Who is the worst sponsor you've ever had?
That's a good way to burn some bridges. I don't know if there's necessarily, I've actually
Or
been
what
lucky
makes
to
a
work.
tough one?
Yeah, I've been lucky to work with a lot of good brands. I will say, I think where brands tend to go wrong is when they throw money at an athlete and they don't really know 100% what they want out of them. Because I think as an athlete, we're here to help you kind of like elevate your vision. So whether that's being on podiums, whether it's social media posts, whatever it is, like you have your brand and how you're marketing it. And I might have 5 to 10 different brands I'm helping it go in certain directions where maybe some people really want, kind of silly posts and jokes. Maybe some people really want like the cool factor and how they want their brand looked at, where if you just leave it open-ended to an athlete, that's okay and that's fine. But I always think having some sort of marketing direction where you're like, hey, I like when this is X, Y, and Z, or really try and, go in this direction without being too restrictive so you can let them be their self. And that I think it's a kind of an art that you almost have to learn as a brand when working with athletes is how much do you let them be themselves to make their posts or to be that, and then how much direction do they need without them feeling like they're just reading from a script and it just feels like an ad. So yeah, kind of two ends of the spectrum there. But that's what I think is something that brands maybe miss sometimes, or can be frustrating if you have a certain idea of what it is and they have a certain idea and you're both in different ends of the court.
Do you find when you make a decision on whether to partner with a brand or not, that you typically lean more from an analytical perspective or kind of go with your gut?
I have kind of two rules of thumb for working with a brand. One, like I want to believe in the product, because I think trying to talk about a product that you don't believe in is really hard. It makes things just difficult
Seems
to
cheap.
talk about. Yeah, and people can see if you're being genuine or not a lot more than you think. And then I also like to make sure that I vibe well with the people in the company, that they're good people as well and they believe in my mission just as much as I believe in theirs. So sometimes you might get in and you might be talking with people and it's just, okay, well, we just see eye to eye, like we just don't see eye to eye on everything. And so maybe you go in a different direction. More often than not, though, I think our sport is filled with a lot of good people behind the brands. So that kind of makes things a little bit easier. Or if you've heard like maybe one brand or another doesn't work well with athletes, or other athletes have had issues, like the conversation doesn't particularly start. So that's kind of like the two areas. And then it's a gut, like it's a financial and a gut decision at the same time, because you're making a decision based on the contract and the product that they're providing you with. And then you're also buying in kind of to like the people and the company and the product as well. So it's kind of those two ends that help me make that decision.
What are some of the key, just because I'm fascinated about this whole contract
Yeah.
obligation slash sealing the deal, what are some of the key things that you kind of put forward first about yourself in terms of the value that you bring to the table?
I think it's more that, I'm fairly flexible, especially if I like a company, in how I work with them, and that kind of just, depends on like what they're asking. And I feel like, I've been established in the sport. So usually when I talk with brands, like I'll introduce myself, make sure they know a little bit about me. But a lot of times they have, in some capacity, heard of me through the grapevine, through some of my past results or what I've done. So I think having kind of that established career in the sport is something also that I can kind of like lean on a little bit, having been through Olympic cycles, mid distance triathlon, long distance triathlon. And then too, that I try and stick with a company and be as loyal as possible as I can with them. And I feel like my track record shows that for a lot of brands where I've worked with them for long periods of time. So I really try and buy into the product and the people and create something that's long and worthwhile, because I feel like these short flashes in the pan don't really do anything for the athlete or the company
Brand.
in general, because you're forgotten about then. Like, unless you're somebody, like a Leonardo DiCaprio or something, where it's like super recognizable, uses the product once and people will remember that. It's like you want to build this storyline with the brand to show why it's a good product or opportunity, and also build up the athlete as well to tell their interesting story. And that's what people relate to in sport and just kind of in general.
So fascinating. What what do you think's been the hardest part about your career?
I think maybe it's periods of inconsistency, or just having to navigate through like some changes. Like, I guess in going into, like, I just recently made the change to move to Loveland to work with my coach Neil Henderson, and just in some of those, it's recognizing when something isn't working for you anymore, and then making a move based on that. And I think in part, sometimes my loyalty and my ability to explain maybe a way why a performance wasn't as good as it was, like to find reasons with that, because there's always a lot of stressors and things going on and things we could have done, versus maybe looking at like maybe the more obvious answer, because it's, a coach or the training or something, versus, oh, the conditions or whatever. Like, coming to some of those points. And there were some transitional points, like the year before the Olympics, like just didn't race as well and had to kind of bounce back to be able to qualify for the Rio Olympic Games. Like 2024, was not racing super well, overtrained, probably tried to overextend, trying to reach, made up demands of racing that I was basing off of other people's performances and workouts, had me overtrained, and had to make the decision to, okay, I was with my same coach for like 7 years, had world championship podiums, but it was just time for a change. And I think that's kind of one of the hardest things, because, had a personal relationship with the coach, like part of the family, and I'm loyal. Like, I don't want to think that, hey, we're training the wrong way. But I think at a certain point too, like, change is necessary also to see and make sure like what you're doing is correct. Because it's kind of a funny phrase, but I like the phrase. It's like, you don't know what you don't know until you know. And that's kind of like, that's the hardest part, is because you're in your own little bubble, focusing on what you're doing, and you have to believe in your process and what you're doing. And then, once you find out, oh, hey, maybe this wasn't right, or we overextended here, we did that. Like, it's the same thing as hindsight's 2020. So making those decisions, I always think is very challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, well, aside from 7 being a number that is like associated with completion or perfectness, like 7 years is a long time that gives you the opportunity to, if you do go try something different, like just the basic physiological nature of the body, it adapts to change. And so if you're doing the same kind of training or the same regimen over 7 years, like, you can get very far with that. But I think it is interesting. There's something to be said about when you do change things up and the body's, wait, what are we doing? Oh, maybe I need to rewrite
Yeah.
myself a little bit, and how I adapt to this.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, when you buy in and you have your routine and what you're doing, like I really just buy into that one phrase because you're believing everything you're doing is 100% right. And until you continue to search out and get other opinions, you don't really know what's going wrong. So until I started to make that decision where like, hey, I finally feel like something's just needs to change here. And I started talking to other people. A lot of that stuff then was confirmed like, hey, yes, this is probably the right decision for you to go and make this move. And yeah, I think also like I have a good team around me, like a lot of good family as well who can kind of speak candidly to everything. And sometimes it takes a little longer for me to listen to them than it should, just because like, again, like I'm wrapped up in it. I feel like I see the day to day and they do to an extent, but maybe not like specifically with how I'm feeling and what I'm doing. So sometimes that takes a little longer to sink in, but eventually if you kind of keep an open mind and keep listening, then it starts to like make sense.
Yeah. Are you happy with what you've accomplished so far in your life?
In terms of like my entire career?
Yeah, and we can even go like beyond triathlon.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm super lucky. Like when I first started, like I had a few goals. Like I wanted to be a professional triathlete and just race the best in the world. And I wanted to go to an Olympic Games, like win a world championship, win an Olympic medal. And I'd say I've accomplished most of that. Like I'm able to sustain a lifestyle that, is pretty unique and fun, and I have a lot of flexibility. It's a disciplined lifestyle, but also one that, I think offers a lot of cool opportunities and have gotten to see the world. Triathlon, helped give me that life too. That's how I met my wife. It's why we have kids, like all of that. Like I'm super proud of and what we've built. And then as far as like career, like I don't feel like I've reached maybe my full potential in racing. So I still feel like that's why I'm continuing to go on. Like once I feel like there's nothing left to give or I don't have that drive to keep trying to push those limits, then that's when it's time to call it. But yeah, I mean, I qualified for the Olympics. I think I realized that the Olympic medal was something that was not unattainable, but would delay other goals that I had in the sport, where I wanted to go race long course, where I felt like my strengths were applied a lot better than in short course, and kind of saw that relatively quickly once I switched over. So maybe left the Olympic medal not on the table, but like I'm okay with that. Like I made peace with that. And then as far as world championships, like that's still something that I kind of pursue every single year. And I guess technically I have a mixed relay world championship, so can, mental gymnastics my way into that one. But no, I mean, the Ironman world champs and half Ironman are something that I would still love. But at the end of the day, I think all I want when I retire or say that I'm proud of it is, have I applied myself in every situation with the information that I know at the time? And I could answer that pretty confidently that I haven't really, half-assed it or haven't fully gone through it. That kind of applies to everything in life too. And, raising kids and doing all of the other things that are involved in life, and can still feel like I can say that. So a long way of answering, like, yes, I think so.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you answering it. Is there a particular way that you have decided to raise your family that you are proud of? Something maybe a little different than most people?
That's interesting. I don't know if it's necessarily different, but I think it's just in learning. Like and I always view things, I guess, from a sports perspective, and whether they're doing sports or not. But I think like kind of the core of it is like when you're trying to be a good person, like you treat others with respect, and then in general in life, just whatever you choose to do, apply yourself fully. And I want to give them the opportunity to pursue their passions the same way I've gotten to pursue mine. So those are some of like the key things, kind of like maybe not like overarching themes, I guess, maybe not overly specific, but I think the hardest thing as a parent is just like letting them be almost like themselves, or letting them go out into the world knowing that you can't always protect them. Like I want to keep that, because like my wife is like this too. Like if, whether it's making friends at school or how, they're being played on the soccer team or whatever, like they also have to grow. They also have to experience some of those lows in life. And I think watching them and helping them navigate that is one of the hardest things, because all you want to do is just protect them. So again, maybe a little tangent on your question, but yeah, just in reflecting on parenthood that way, I think that's what kind of one of the hardest, but just taking some of, like, I think sport is just a great teacher in learning a lot of that, the hardships, learning discipline. And if you can take those generic learnings from sport and apply them to life, I think that's really worthwhile and helps you out a lot.
Yeah, it all has to do with stress management. How much stress can you take, healthfully recover, and then apply it again? And that's so
Exactly.
true. Business, yeah, spirituality, sport, whatever. Do you have any regrets?
I don't think regrets necessarily. No. I mean, would I go back and maybe change things with knowledge that I have now? Like maybe say to myself, going into the Olympics and stuff, like, hey, leave a few more reps in the tank. Like, and I'm going to speak in sports overall because that's just, my life, but like that sort of thing. But again, like you operate with the information that you know, with
At the
the
time?
coaches
Yeah.
you have, with the people in your life, with everything, and you try and make the best decisions. And I feel like overall, I've tried to make the best decisions in life in general. And so that's kind of gotten me to where I am at this moment right here. So can I always be better? Sure. Like I'm not perfect in any means, but I think with making those decisions, like I'm still like mistakes are just periods of learning. Like there's no like failures in general, like whether it's sport or life, you're just learning something. And as long as you're learning from it, I don't think people should necessarily have regrets overall.
So, in the context of your life, centered around belief and the knowledge and the beliefs that you've been able to build over the years, what's something you believe now that you didn't a few years ago?
I think when I look at it, it's more about like it sounds simple, but even in the sport of triathlon, it's more about how fast you're going than how strong you are. I got really caught up in how strong do I have to be, like on the bike in particular, how many watts do I have to push? And that doesn't really serve you if you're not moving fast through the
Translating it.
course. So I was leaving, like I thought that I had a fast CDA, but it turns out that when I applied it in a race, it wasn't as fast as it could be. So, yeah, I mean, again, it's not like a life lesson or something, but it's always, I think it's just something where it's like, look at the core of what you're doing and what is the objective. And triathlon is not to be necessarily the fittest person on earth. It's to be who can go fastest from point A to point B. So I think that for me too is a little bit eye-opening just in general of like, okay, where else, like in general, have I kind of maybe been looking at something in the wrong light and need to readjust it? And don't necessarily have any examples right at the top of my head, but I think it was also just a good reminder in general to keep reanalyzing and figuring out, like how to achieve what you want to achieve.
I know you told me that you were thinking when you went to college, like kinesiology or some kind of degree like that. You strike me as like very much an engineer type. Do you reject that assumption? Or that
Not
observation?
necessarily. I mean, I think I wouldn't say like math is my strongest suit overall. Like I think it like high level math. Like I started to struggle with maybe like fully understanding the concepts. Thankfully, I had a good couple friends who were like PhDs in math to help me through some of my online calculus classes. But I think the analytical side, I would agree with overall, and just maybe the amount of thought. But I think like athletes are interesting because you have to be analytical, but you also have to be creative at the same time. And you have to, find like racing. I think there's also an art form to that. So while we tend to, as triathletes, focus a lot on numbers and aerodynamics, like whatever sort of times you're going, you also have to figure out how do you apply the fitness that you have in a way that can exploit others and be able to get yourself to the finish line fastest? Or if you're going to be giving effort, how do you make others give even more effort? So some of that racecraft, I think, then plays into some of the other creativity that you could have.
Interesting. So I'm curious to know how you would answer this. Whenever you go to races, I'm assuming people are like, "Oh, hey Ben, can I get your picture?" Or how are you planning to race this weekend? Or, just kind of the typical jargon. What is something that you wish people asked you more often?
More often. Well, it doesn't happen maybe as often. Maybe in certain situations and certain races, people will recognize me more than other places. But I think it's interesting as a triathlete, like you can live a pretty normal, like you don't get recognized as much. But honestly, like I don't think I wish people asked me anything in particular. I do enjoy the engagement with fans and people who are interested in the sport. Because I'm pretty aware too, like they're part of the reason why I'm able to do what I'm able to do. And I think having that sort of connection with fans who are probably people you're sharing the race course with that weekend anyways is something that's special about triathlon. So we all love the same sport. We're all working just as hard to get to the start line and the finish line. And I think having that sort of connection is just cool. So whether they want to talk about, bike equipment, how I'm feeling, the course, the weather, whatever it is, like, I think that's all, just as entertaining. And I'm usually hyped up on adrenaline and caffeine going into a race anyways, so I'll probably be pretty talkative.
Yeah. So on your website, you stated kind of 3 goals in the triathlon world, and I'll just run through them really quick. Be a great ambassador for people in the sport while inspiring them to find their potential. 2, bring new people into the sport. And 3, get younger children and adults active and healthy through the sport. Have you completed those goals yet?
I think those goals are always ongoing, because I mean the basis of it is like it's cool to win races, and that helps. That gives you a platform. But I also think it's really awesome to try and leave the sport a better place than you found it. I think that triathlon in general is improving. But I've always loved, like I got to talk to a Boy Scout kind of group just recently. Like I love engaging with people who might not know the sport or are young and just love sports in general. And even adults, like I've done camps, I do a little coaching, like just being able to engage with all different types of people in and out of the sport to try and grow it, like express ideas on it, just generate excitement in it, like I think is awesome. I've been able to go to the CAF like Greatest Day and Try too, and I think that's one of like the most powerful weekends in the sport. So just some things like that, like there's always more that I could do and that I want to do. It's just if I have the capacity to do it right now. And I think I'm always trying to search for some of those ways, but at the basis of it too, like I just want to at least try and show people, whether it's in the sport of triathlon or not, like pick a goal and dream about achieving it, believe it, and just try and go out and execute that. Like be disciplined, apply yourself, and chase your passions. Because at the core of it, like, yes, triathlon's a great sport and I want to see it explode everywhere. But what I've been able to do is just kind of live out my dream and be able to chase a passion and apply myself in a way and kind of have that discipline and live like that sort of lifestyle.
Yeah, whether it's our kids or somebody who's observing you race as a professional, I think at the end of the day, it has so much more to do with, like you're saying, how we live our lives by example rather than what we say. There's some beautiful things that can be said, and every once in a while those things can be memorable, but I found that it's usually the things that stick with me, especially from a verbal perspective, are like the small little things said in passing, and then the acts that people have about them that they've done something, usually when not maybe many people are watching. Like those are the things that really stick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. So just a couple of questions for you. Are you a religious guy?
Yes. Grew up Catholic, still faith-based and everything. So definitely a spiritual component.
How does that affect the way that you center yourself, the way that you, train from a daily basis, parent your kids, be a husband.
Yeah. I think in general, as a human, it's comforting to have a trust that unknown is kind of taken care of. That whatever is coming next, like you can handle it. To have faith and just like in general, like you can kind of whether it's pray, talk with somebody, whatever, just kind of pass off some of those stressors. Like we would frame it like in Christianity in general as having somebody help you carry your cross. Like I think that that's something that is really just comforting, because otherwise, like I do think the world could potentially feel very lonely. An existential crisis is something, like feeling very small, alone, not able to handle everything is I can understand why maybe people would fall to that. So I think just in general with that, there's a lot of comfort that comes from it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a huge piece, like that I don't know everybody has experience, or I don't know how you would experience it if you were not religious of some sort or believe in a higher power, like the offloading of things you cannot control. Because I think for me, the greatest thing that I've struggled with throughout my life has been the desire to control the uncontrollables, and like that gets you into a frenzy that
Well, it's
it
just
just
like
creates so many problems.
that's again why triathlon is so like there's so many things that you can't control, and it's just like focusing on what you can. So yeah, having that ability to kind of ask for that help or trust that, hey, like everything I'm being given, like I can handle, like those sorts of things. Like even if it's just like a little bit of comfort, like mentally, I think there's a little bit of offloading of stress even that happens there.
Yeah. And also, what's really neat. So, one thing I've been really excited about having a child now, and she's only 2 weeks old, but I feel like a deeper sense of like love to her, but like trying to view the cosmic view of like, Christ giving his only son, or like God viewing us as his children. Now having my own children, my question to you is, as you, like your kids are now, oldest is 5, do you find that your love continues to grow for your children in that way?
Yeah, I think it's wild because when you first have a kid, like I don't want to say helpless, but they rely on you so much. Like they're an infant.
Yeah.
Like you're pretty much doing everything for them. And then as they grow up and they go to the toddler stage and past the toddler stage, you start to see their personality develop and them as a human being develop. And sometimes it's crazy on multiple different aspects. One, you have to remind yourself that they're a kid and they're still learning, because it's amazing how fast they kind of like grow up. And like my daughter, I swear she jumps between being 5, 15, and 35. Like she goes like throws attitude
awesome.
or rolls the eyes, and just they pick up on everything. So it's like knowing that they're a kid, seeing the world through their eyes, and then also just I don't know. It's absolutely kind of wild because they're their own little person too, and they're seeing a lot of this stuff for the first time, trying to understand things. So I just think it's a crazy process, because like you can kind of see that like when they're an infant, you start to see little things, but like by the time they hit 3, 4, 5 and beyond, it's like they have almost their own personality already like going on, and almost seemingly out of nowhere. So I think that's like the most amazing thing about it all.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the because I've heard this concept of like, oh, when your child starts to grow, you'll recognize yourself or your spouse in them, but then there'll be other little things where they develop on their own. You're like, wait, where did that come from? Do you have any of those little tidbits where you're like, hold on, that was neither one of us. Where did that come from?
Nothing that pops out in general. I think what's mostly recognizing is like when it's like straight up like, oh, that's my wife, or oh, that's
Yeah.
me, like just kind of back and forth. Or I think the funniest thing is if they're misbehaving or something, you pass it off to your spouse, like that's
Yeah.
your son or that's your daughter. So, no, nothing, but it's like, it's this blend. So even when you see yourself in them or your spouse, you're still like, oh, it's like their own unique like take on it. Like it's almost like it's them, but at the same time, you're like, no, that's like, it's like a good blend of almost everybody, and it's like their own little take on what you were doing. So it's just really fun and interesting that way.
Yeah, super cool. Well, I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Well, last thing, for anybody who is considering, especially in the professional realm of being a professional athlete and then also being maybe a mother or father, what is some advice you would give to them on how to make something like that work?
I think a lot of it is time management. And I also think it's important, whether you're being a professional or not, is just showing them that you're working hard towards something. And whether it is a success or quote unquote failure, that like that's a part of the whole process. So, I mean, that's what I try and think of with my kids, is showing them, hey, like, maybe I don't want to go do this swim, or I don't always want to go run, or they don't want me to, but like, it's important because, I'm applying myself, working towards something bigger. And I think it's important, like, you're taking time for yourself when you're pursuing this. And maybe it's not always exactly what you want to do. Maybe you want to, sit and read a book with them or just stay inside, but you're showing that kind of discipline, but then also like being present in whatever you're doing. So when you're gone, be present, make the most of that time. But then when you're with your kids, and it's hard in this day and age with cell phones, TV, screens everywhere. And as a parent, like, you feel like you're always rushing around from one appointment to the next, like trying to rush the kids, but like try and like be as present as possible. And that's something that I've been trying to work more and more on, just because it is easy to, just zone out, cash in, just try and get through the day because you're tired. I think it's like, try and be as intentional as you can in all things. And that's, I think especially important for kids because they're watching you while you're around them as well.
Yeah. Great advice. Be present. Don't pick up the phone. I'm even trying to be aware of that now, just in the even though she can't necessarily see that I'm sitting looking at a phone.
It's hard because it's like, that's the whole point of the phone, is to keep you addicted and on it. So
yeah, it's crazy. They've gotten too good at the addiction. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the AI stuff rolls around. Like I remember being in high school and getting my phone for the first time, and like, up to 14 years old, like my mom would yell like, Seth, time to come home, or call a friend and, try to guess where I was. And now we are like full circle to the AI. My daughter will never know a life without that stuff, which is just like crazy. I don't even know if she'll be driving her own car by the time she's 16. Like, everything is just gonna drive itself.
Yeah, I know. Nuts. It's crazy how fast everything moves.
Yeah. Well, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time. It's an honor and pleasure to get to meet with you and chat with you a little bit. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much to Ben for jumping on the podcast. Really cool guy. Obviously, very much of an analytical mind. Like I said, I feel like he fits the engineer type pretty well. Maybe not the math side, but the experiential, experimental engineer type. But yeah, really great guy. Obviously fast, and lives a life that is worth living through triathlon, through being a dad, through being a husband. So yeah, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time. If you made it to this point in the podcast, though, just want to say thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. If you could like, comment, subscribe, and share this podcast, that continues to help grow it and helps get the word out for people to hear these stories that impact them, hopefully in a more positive way, in what they do in life, triathlon or otherwise. So thank you so much. And if you want to sign up for a newsletter, you can do that in the show notes below. And for ways to support the podcast, if you want to get some socks or get some of the bar bags right here, let me know. All right. Thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you later. Peace.